Autumn with Richard and Judy. Coming up this time.
I just don't know where else to go. She's my sister. You said the whole family disappeared. Yes. When? 7th of January.
I'm sort of saying goodbye to all these characters. And I've lived with them for so long, sometimes for 2-3 years, and I know them so well.
No, I did all kinds of different jobs, actually. I was a chambermaid for a while. I had a really unsuccessful career, which lasted 3 days as a cycle courier.
I worked in children's animation, which was really fun because I was writing this adorable show during the day, and at night I was writing really dark, messed up murder fiction.
Hello, and welcome to the Richard and Judy Book Club Autumn Collection.
And we get going with the tale of a serial killer, but it's got quite a twist. It's The Shining Girls by Lauren Beukes.
We go time travelling to start with as a would-be victim turns the tables on the man who wants to hunt her down. Coming up in this edition, Lauren Beukes tells us how she created such a great story, and we find out a bit about her African upbringing.
And Chicago, like Johannesburg, is this bright, shiny city, but it has major issues with segregation, corruption, and crime. My friends told me that there had been 40 shootings in one weekend, and I was like, wow, Johannesburg is safer.
Before all that, though, let's hear what you'd recommend taking off the shelf the next time you pop into WHSmith.
A book I've read recently, which I really have enjoyed, is A Gathering Light, which was our book club book last time, which was just fantastic. It's a real-life murder story, which is told in a very interesting way. So I thoroughly recommend it.
From the Richard and Judy Book Club, I'm looking forward to reading Adriana Trigiani's The Shoemaker's Wife, because I so enjoyed Rococo with its hint of Mediterranean sunshine that I'm really looking forward to the next book from her.
I've just finished reading Dead Simple by Peter James, which was one of those books you think is going to be quite gory because the premise is quite gory, but actually it's quite good in the end, and it didn't go into like the blood and guts that you expect some books to go into, but really, really good about a bridegroom that gets buried alive on his stag night, and you think it's going to be really gruesome, but it's just the whole story about how he gets rescued and just really interesting, so I really enjoyed that.
Richard and Judy introduce you to Lauren Beukes and her book, The Shining Girls.
And Lauren's here with us now. Thank you for coming. You're from Cape Town, you live in Cape Town, and yet you've written this amazing book set in 1930s Chicago. Do you know Chicago well?
I lived in Chicago in 2000 and 2001.
Right.
I originally moved to New York for love, and that was a disaster, and I ended up staying in Chicago with some friends.
Yeah.
And it just
You ran away from New York?
Yes, I ran away from New York.
Oh, dear.
It all turned out great because, I got a book out of it.
Yeah.
And Chicago seemed to have a lot in common with major themes that I like to write about.
Such as?
Such as, it has a lot in common with Johannesburg, which is that...
Which is where you were brought up?
I grew up in Johannesburg. And Chicago, like Johannesburg, is this bright, shiny city, but it has major issues with segregation, corruption, and crime. When I was in Chicago, I went back on a research trip to pick up the real details again. My friends told me that there had been 40 shootings in one weekend the previove summer. And I was like, wow, Johannesburg is safer. So there's a lot of that, and there are a lot of the social issues that I really like to play with.
I think we've read many descriptions of the Great Depression. There's been so much literature, obviously, revolving around it. But I must say, your description of life on the shore, on the lake shore in Chicago in the winter of, is it 1930-31, is gripping. It's because you really do bring home the utter squalid poverty and violence and danger of what it was like to be unemployed and basically living in these awful shanty towns that sprung up along the beach. Cardboard shacks.
Anything to keep warm.
Which is very Johannesburg, as you say.
Absolutely.
And this underpinning of constant danger and violence. As you say, you obviously had sources in Johannesburg that you could call on for that. But, I mean, did you have to do much research to find out what it was like back then?
I did a ton of research, and I specifically looked at oral histories. And I found some amazing articles written by someone who'd been the self-proclaimed mayor of one of these shanty towns. It wasn't actually in Chicago, but it was, I think, in Omaha or somewhere like that.
Right.
And he'd written the most amazing description. And
he was like the guy, and he was you say self-proclaimed. He was like sort of a vigilante head of Chicago.
Exactly, yeah. So he was he proclaimed himself the mayor of the shanty town, or Hooverville, as they were called for President Hoover. Very ironically, of course. And he would try and create justice and kind of rally the community around and try and protect their rights and everything. And I used a little bit of him fictionalized and moved, transplanted to Chicago.
Well, let's get to the plot because it is extraordinary.
It's a brilliant plot,
you've
by the
had
way. Fantastic plot.
You've had some amazing. Stephen King loves it. He's given you a quote. I mean, the great
It's amazing.
Stephen King.
I know.
Incredible. Gillian Flynn, who of course wrote Gone Girl, which has been the most massive hit all over the world.
And a wonderful
here.
book.
And everybody is saying that The Shining Girls is going to be the successor to Gone Girl. So let's get to the plot. Basically, it's science fiction, but you have written science fiction in the past, haven't you?
It's tricky. I find labels quite limiting.
Yeah.
I would say that I write high concept thrillers.
High concept thrillers.
Yeah.
Okay, right. I know exactly what you mean, and I know exactly how this book fits into them because there is a supernatural aspect which is Stephen Kingish. But it's not. It's very, very much your own. This low-life drifter, Harper Curtis,
What a name.
in
Harper
1930s.
Curtis. And you're published by HarperCollins. It's
I know.
fantastic. Yeah, that's fair, isn't it?
The book focuses on him. He is running away from vigilantes at the beginning of the book because he's killed a man in a bar fight.
He's a low-life drifter.
He is.
Of the worst kind. He's horrible.
He's a violent loser.
Horrible man.
Yeah, and he, while trying to escape from the vigilantes on the shores of the Great Lake, he takes advantage of a poor blind woman, kills her in fact, to try and hide, and also takes the overcoat she's wearing because it's freezing cold. It's November, isn't it? When it's done. It's freezing cold, and he puts on her overcoat, and in the coat pocket he finds a key. Now, this is the sort of supernatural aspect. After a couple of other things that happen to him in hospital, he is gradually but inexorably drawn to a part of Chicago which is incredibly run down. And he finds this house, and the key fits the house, and he gets in. Now, can you explain what happens to him when he gets into that house?
He walks into the house, and it looks abandoned from the outside. It's dilapidated, the doors and windows are boarded up. And he turns the key in the lock, he opens it, and it is like stepping into the most immaculate, perfect, wonderful dream home.
Right.
There's beautiful wallpaper, there's new appliances taken straight from the Sears catalog in the kitchen, there's a fire in the fireplace, whiskey, and obviously this is during Prohibition, so that's a special treat.
Yeah.
And
all for him.
All for him. There's a suitcase under the couch with betting slips from weird times in it.
Yeah.
And money. And in weird currencies, which don't really make much sense because they don't look like the banknotes that he's used to.
Right.
And he's drawn upstairs, and as he walks upstairs, limping with his crutch because he was injured, he finds his way to the bedroom, and he opens the window, and he looks outside the window, and it's like looking through a zoetrope. Things change.
Looking through
a zoetrope. It was a carnival thing. It was kind of the predecessor to film.
Right.
You know, it was a roundy bout thing which
So
showed
things just passing all the
things
time.
passing, things changing. You know, like the seasons change. There's a couch which kind of moves across the courtyard outside and catches fire. The buildings peel and are repainted.
He's looking into time.
He's looking into time, and it's changing in front of his eyes, and he can't stand it, and he pulls the curtain shut, and he staggers backwards and kind of falls onto the bed, and he turns around, and there is a wall, and it is covered with just scratchings and pen and knife points, and it's covered in these strange objects like a plastic pony, which of course he's never seen plastic before, and these women's names. And Jin Suk and Willie and Kirby, and names he's never seen before but somehow seem familiar. Mm-hmm. And he knows that these are the Shining Girls and that it is his destiny to find them and kill them. Harper, 17 July 1974. He clenches the orange plastic pony in the pocket of his sports coat. It is sweaty in his hand. Midsummer here, too hot for what he's wearing, but he has learned to put on a uniform for this purpose. And jeans in particular. He takes long strides, a man who walks because he's got somewhere to be, despite his gimpy foot. Harper Curtis is not a moocher, and time waits for no one, except when it does.
So basically he becomes a serial killer, he's already killed, but a specific serial killer, travelling through time to find, and in the most violent way, kill these girls. But there's one girl that he attacks, and he doesn't succeed. She's incredibly feisty and doughty. In fact, if it's not too gruesome, prepare yourself, listeners, she manages to escape by holding her own intestines in. where he's trying to slash her open and eviscerate her, but she survives. And she becomes his sort of nemesis, doesn't she? Without giving too much away. Is that giving too much away?
That's on the back cover. And I think that's the important thing, is that this is not a book about a time-traveling serial killer. It is a book about the survivor who is turned the hunt around, and she is going to find him. And even though it is this completely impossible mystery, she's going to find him and stop him.
It's incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, his MO, his modus operandi, which is how we would normally trace a serial killer. Typically, they get more violent over time, so you can see that they're more violent, progressively more violent, more elaborate. But he's jumping.
He's flip-flopping through time, so there's no pattern.
The girl is sitting cross-legged on the ground, her bare knees white and bony as bird skulls and grass-stained. She looks up at the sound of his boots scrunching on the gravel, but only long enough for him to see that her eyes are brown under that tangle of grubby curls before she dismisses him and goes back to her business. "What are you doing?" he says, putting brightness in his voice. He crouches down beside her in the threadbare grass. Really, he's never seen a child with such crazy hair, like she got spun around in her own personal dust devil, one that tossed up the assortment of random junk splayed around her. A cluster of rusty tin cans, a broken bicycle wheel tipped on its side, spokes jabbing outwards. Her attention is focused on a chipped teacup, turned upside down, so that the silvered flowers on the lip disappear into the grass. The handle is broken off, leaving 2 blunt stumps. "You having a tea party, sweetheart?" He tries again. "It's not a tea party," she mutters into the petal-shaped collar of her checked shirt. Kids with freckles shouldn't be so earnest, he thinks. It doesn't suit them.
How did you find writing time travel? I mean, it's notoriously difficult because you have to suspend all numbers of disbeliefs. Did you occasionally find yourself almost tripping over the illogicality of what you were writing?
I tried to keep it very logical. I've seen time travel done badly. I think if you establish a set of rules, then you have to maintain that set of rules.
Right.
And I had this murder wall above my desk, which it looks completely crazy. It looks like something out of Homeland or A Beautiful Mind, or maybe Seven. I'm not a serial killer. Tracking the different timelines and the different murders across the timelines. And the objects, because he takes mementos from each girl and leaves it behind on someone else to kind of create these constellations through time. And tracking the movements of the objects and where they were, and to make sure that everything is consistent. And although there is a paradox at the heart of the book, and there are loops and crossovers, that everything makes sense.
Well, we have to tell you, Lauren, that in fact this entire interview was a dupe. You've been summoned here in a secure location. The police are waiting outside. We're on to you. We know it's basically an autobiography. We know.
No, it's a brilliant book. I have to say, I may as well say it's been my favourite of this autumn's list. So congratulations. I'm sure it's going to do incredibly well. It already has done incredibly well. And I hope you manage to do as well as Gillian Flynn.
Thank you so much. And thank you for picking it. It's amazing.
It's totally fresh, it's totally unpredictable. It's a murder mystery, it's a crime thriller. It's very tense, but it has this supernatural hook of time travelling.
I think what Lauren's done really well is, and this is so hard when you're writing a book about time travelling. For example, The Time Traveller's Wife, which was obviously a huge success, and some people couldn't get on with it because they found the whole notion of time travel just too much to swallow, But I think even people like that might go along with this story because she, as she said in the interview that we did with her, she draws her parameters about time travel, the rules for time travel, very firmly, and she doesn't stray outside them. So it all has a kind of an inner logic, and you can actually suspend your disbelief and think, well, yeah, this could actually happen. It's a very clever piece of writing.
And the villain, Harper Curtis, who's a complete low-life psychopath, a really, really deeply unpleasant, crazy man, actually, he is crazy, is tremendously compelling character.
Yes.
And Kirby, the girl who he tries to kill, his nemesis, he tries to kill, but she escapes and determines to hunt him down against the most appalling odds. I mean, travelling through different centuries, all in Chicago, is a great character. Really kind of feisty and courageous and great. I loved it. I really loved it. And I loved the picture of Chicago. She obviously knows Chicago very, very well, and Chicago starting in the Depression in the 30s and the way it goes through. I love it.
I told her after the interview that her description of sort of collapsing Chicago in the early 30s, in the middle of the Depression, reminded me very much, because I was reading it at the same time, of bankrupt Detroit today. These wonderful old houses just collapsing inwards like rotting teeth. And she says that her next novel is set in Detroit.
Motown.
Hi, I'm Lauren Beukes, and I'm the author of The Shining Girls. I write because the stories need to come through me. It's a way of exercising the tales that shape our lives. Letting my imagination run. I'm trying to say something about the world through story. If I were to write an autobiography of my life, I think I would probably call it my personal motto, which is be cheeky, but don't be an asshat. I've struggled a lot. Before I got this book deal, I nearly lost my house. My husband and I were both unemployed, and we didn't actually know how we were going to pay the mortgage. And we didn't know how we were going to pay my daughter's school fees. And suddenly this came through, and it was life-changing. And this is my third novel. And I'd won a major award, and things don't necessarily pan out. And I think you have to learn to roll with the gut punches. And success comes down to a number of factors. It's talent, obviously, hopefully. It's hard work and determination. And that's rolling with the gut punches. It's like when you get knocked to the floor, you spit out your teeth, you stand up, you wipe the blood off your mouth, and you say, bring it, let's go again. But it's also luck. And luck is opportunity that you've grabbed onto. And I think, you can't predict luck, you can't plan for luck, you can't plan to win a major award that'll put you on editors' radars. It just comes along, and when it's ready, when it comes, you better be ready for it. There's a wonderful E.L. Doctorow quote about how writing is like taking a road trip at night. You know where you're leaving from and you know where you're going to, and the rest of the way you can see 20 feet ahead of you in the headlights, and you just have to figure it out. So I always know my endings. I always know what I'm working towards. I know some of the major waypoints along the way. But the rest of the time, there's a lot of subconscious play, and I think that's really important, to be able to see what comes up, to see what emerges, especially in a novel like this, which is so dependent on history. And the historical research was so rich and so amazing, it turned up the most phenomenal details that I could never have made up.
Well, a book like The Shining Girls really makes you wonder, if you could time travel, Richard, would you go back and change anything?
Oh, obviously, definitely, yeah. I would go right back and completely rethink, maybe even redo a certain impression that I once did on This Morning. Do you remember? I can't even do it now. Boyakashar. No, it's all
terrible,
gone.
Richard. It's terrible. Anyway, we're heading for a hosepipe ban with our next text.
The air in the kitchen is like a solid entity filling the space, pushing Greta down into the floor against the side of the table. Only she would choose to bake bread in such weather. I'm Maggie Farrell, and I'm the author of Instructions for a Heat Ray.
Yippee! So it's off with the thermals and on with the mankini.
And now, Richard, let's not do anything that may require time travel to set things straight.
But I look so good in it.